People like him don't live here. The words came out cold and certain. Daniel Carter stopped at the gate. For a brief second, he didn't turn. His dark brown hand rested calmly against the black iron bars, fingers steady, composed. Like this place was familiar to him. Like he had every right to be there. Behind him, the sharp sound of heels approached. "I'm talking to you." Now he turned. Daniel Carter, tall, well-built, a black man in his late 30s, stood in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His presence was quiet but powerful. The kind of confidence that didn't need to prove itself. Across from him stood Victoria Hayes, fair-skinned, blonde, mid-40s, dressed in an expensive cream outfit that reflected the wealth of the neighborhood. Her posture was stiff, her expression tight with suspicion and something deeper. "You can't just walk in here," she said, folding her arms. "This is a private property." Daniel glanced briefly past her. The wide driveway, the modern glass house beyond it, the stillness of a place built on status. Then he looked back at her. "I know," he replied calmly. That calm irritated her, her jaw tightened. "No, I don't think you do," she snapped. "Because if you did, you wouldn't be standing here acting like you belong." A curtain shifted in the house across the street. Someone paused their car. Eyes were watching now, Daniel noticed. But he didn't react. "I do belong here," he said quietly. The sentence was simple, but it carried weight. Victoria let out a short, dismissive laugh. "No," she said. "People like you don't live here." There it was, clear, unfiltered. The assumption wasn't hidden anymore. It sat between them, heavy and undeniable. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, not with anger, not with offense, but with a kind of patience that made the moment even more uncomfortable, because he understood something she didn't. This wasn't about the house or the gate. It was about what she saw when she looked at him and what she refused to see. "You should leave," Victoria added, stepping closer, "before I call security." Daniel exhaled slowly, then stepped back from the gate, not in defeat, not in fear, just controlled. "Go ahead," he said. That answer threw her off. For a split second, she expected resistance, an argument. But he gave her nothing, and somehow that made everything feel more tense. Victoria quickly pulled out her phone. "Yes, I need security at Lot 17 immediately," she said, her voice louder now. "There's a man trying to enter a property he clearly doesn't belong to." The word clearly echoed, deliberate. Sharp. Daniel stood still waiting, not for permission, not for validation, but for the truth to arrive. Minutes passed. The silence grew heavier. Victoria ended the call and looked at him again. This time her confidence felt slightly forced. "You're very quiet," she said. Daniel adjusted his cuff. "I don't need to say much." That unsettled her, because something about him didn't match her assumption. The way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he didn't react. A small crack formed in her certainty, but she pushed it down. No, she was right. She had to be. In the distance, a security vehicle approached. Relief washed over her face. This was it, the moment everything would be confirmed. The guard stepped out. Alert, professional. "Mom, what's the issue?" one asked. Victoria pointed immediately. "He was trying to get in. I've never seen him before, and trust me, he doesn't live here." The guard turned to Daniel. "Sir, do you have identification?" Daniel nodded. Slowly, calmly, he reached into his pocket and handed it over. The guard looked down and paused. Something changed. A flicker of confusion, then recognition. Before he could speak, Victoria cut in again. "That doesn't prove anything," she said quickly. "IDs can be fake." The guard didn't respond. He was already speaking into his radio. Quiet fofists. Seconds passed. Then, his posture straightened. He handed the ID back immediately. Apologies, Mr. Carter, Victoria blinked. What? The guard stepped back respectfully. Mom, this property is registered under his name. Silence heavy. Unavoidable. Victoria shook her head. No, that's not possible. But Daniel was already looking at her, calm, unshaken. You've lived here for 2 years, he said. Right? Her voice caught. How do you know that? Daniel held her gaze. Because I own this property. The words didn't just land. They shattered everything. Her expression collapsed. Confidence, certainty, control, gone in an instant. I didn't know, she whispered. Daniel nodded slightly. That's the problem, he said. You didn't ask. The truth settled deep, uncomfortable, unavoidable. You saw me, he continued, his voice steady, and decided I didn't belong. Victoria looked down. No defense left. No justification, just reality. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said. Not harsh, just honest. Daniel took a step toward the gate again. This time, no one stopped him. Next time, he said quietly, ask before you assume. He opened the gate, walked inside, like he always could, like he always did, and behind him, Victoria Hayes stood frozen. Not because she was proven wrong, but because, for the first time, she was forced to see what she had chosen not to. Victoria Hayes didn't lower her voice. She raised it. That car doesn't belong to you. The words rang across the quiet street, sharp enough to pull attention from behind closed windows. Curtains shifted. A door cracked open. Neighbors leaned just enough to see without being seen. Across from her, Daniel Carter stood beside the sleek black car, one hand resting lightly on the door. He didn't respond, didn't rush, didn't defend himself. He simply looked at her. That silence only made her louder. I've seen this car before, Victoria continued, stepping closer, heels striking the pavement with purpose. And I know exactly who owns it. Daniel's expression didn't change. Tall, composed, a black man in his late 30s, dressed in a tailored navy suit. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that didn't ask for attention, but somehow commanded it. You should step away from the vehicle, she said. Now, still nothing. No argument, no explanation, just calm, and that calm felt like resistance, like defiance. Victoria's jaw tightened. Are you even listening to me? She snapped. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Yes, he said. One word, soft, controlled. But it didn't satisfy her. It irritated her. Because she wasn't just looking for an answer. She was looking for submission. I don't think you understand the situation, she said, folding her arms tightly. This neighborhood has standards. Daniel glanced briefly around. Perfect lawns, expensive homes. Silence built on status. Then he looked back at her. I understand perfectly, he replied. Agan, calm, measured, unshaken. A car slowed at the end of the street. Someone inside watched openly now. The moment was growing, and Victoria could feel it. She needed control back. You're trespassing, she said louder, making sure others could hear. And if you don't leave right now, I will call the police. That word hung in the air. Police. It wasn't just a threat. It was power. Or at least, she thought it was. Daniel didn't move, didn't even look away. Go ahead, he said. That response hit differently because there was no fear in it. No hesitation, just certainty. And that certainty began to crack something inside her confidence. But she pushed it down quickly, pulled out her phone, dialed. Yes, she said, her voice sharp and urgent. I need officers here immediately. There's a man trying to steal a vehicle. The word steal echoed, heavy, intentional. Daniel's eyes didn't change, but something in the air did. The accusation had escalated, and now there was no easy way back. Victoria ended the call and looked at him again. This time, searching, waiting, expecting him to react, to panic, to explain. But he didn't. He just stood there, still, calm, like the situation didn't belong to her anymore. "You're very quiet for someone in your position," she said. Daniel adjusted his cuffs slowly. "I don't need to be loud to be understood." That line lingered, because it shifted the energy. Her voice had filled the street, but his carried weight, and people were noticing. A man across the road stepped closer to his gate. Two teenagers paused their walk. Even the air felt tighter. Victoria crossed her arms again, gripping them this time. "You think staying calm changes anything?" she challenged. Daniel met her gaze directly. "No," he said. "It just reveals more." For a second, she didn't understand, then she did. And she didn't like it, because suddenly, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her, her tone, her words, her assumptions, and how loud they had become. In the distance, sirens began to rise, faint, but approaching. Relief washed over her face. Finally, authority, confirmation, proof. She straightened her posture, confidence returning quickly. "This is where it ends," she said under her breath. But Daniel didn't react. He simply turned his gaze toward the sound of the sirens, calm, certain, like he wasn't waiting to be judged. He was waiting for the truth to arrive. And in that moment, as the sound grew louder, one thing became clear. Her voice had controlled the beginning, but his silence was about to control the end. The black SUV rolled in slowly, smooth, controlled. Official Victoria Hayes exhaled the moment she saw it. Finally, authority had arrived. Two security guards stepped out, tall, uniformed, alert. Their presence alone shifted the energy of the street. What had been a tense argument was now becoming something formal, something decided. Victoria didn't wait. She walked toward them quickly, heels striking the pavement with confidence restored. "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice urgent but controlled. "This man has been trying to enter private property." She pointed sharply behind her. Daniel Carter stood exactly where she had left him, still calm, unmoved. One of the guards nodded and stepped forward. "Sir," he said firmly, "we're going to need you to step away from the entrance." Daniel didn't argue, didn't question. He simply stepped back, slowly, deliberately, like he was cooperating, not complying. That difference was subtle, but real. Victoria crossed her arms, watching closely. This was the moment, the confirmation she had been waiting for. "You see?" she added, louder now. "I told you. He doesn't belong here." The guard didn't respond immediately. His focus stayed on Daniel. "Do you have any identification, sir?" Daniel reached into his pocket. No sudden movements, no hesitation. He pulled out his wallet and handed over his ID. The guard took it, glanced down. For a second, nothing. Then something shifted, a pause small but noticeable. Victoria stepped closer, impatience creeping in. "Well?" she asked. "It's probably fake." The second guard turned slightly toward her. "Mom, please give us a moment." That didn't sit well with her, but she stepped back anyway, because she was still confident, still certain. This would go her way, it had to. The first guard spoke quietly into his radio, low voice, professional tone. Daniel stood with his hands relaxed at his sides. No tension, no urgency. Like he wasn't part of the problem, like he was just waiting, and that calm, again, felt out of place. Victoria noticed it, and for a split second, it bothered her. Why wasn't he nervous? Why wasn't he explaining himself? Why wasn't he trying to defend his position? That question lingered, but she pushed it away, because the outcome was obvious. Or at least, it should been. The radio crackled. The guard listened carefully, then his posture changed, not dramatically, but enough. He looked down at the ID again, then back at Daniel. Different this time. Measured. Respectful. Victoria's confidence flickered, just slightly. "What is it?" she pressed. The guard didn't answer her. Instead, he stepped forward and handed the ID back to Daniel. "Thank you, sir." "Sir." The word landed wrong. Victoria frowned. "Wait, what?" The second guard straightened his stance. "Mom," he said carefully. "We're verifying some details." But the tone had shifted. Subtle, yet unmistakable. And Victoria felt it. Something wasn't going the way she expected. "No," she said quickly. "There's nothing to verify. He was trying to get in. That's all you need to know." Daniel finally spoke, calm as ever. "I wasn't trying," he said. "I was entering." That correction irritated her instantly. "Entering?" she snapped. "You don't get to twist words." "Mom," the guard interrupted gently. "Please." Silence fell again, but now it felt different because the power had started to shift, and everyone could feel it. The neighbors watching, the guards standing, even Victoria herself. The control she had at the beginning. The certainty, the authority, it was slipping. Not gone, not yet, but no longer solid. The first guard spoke into his radio one more time. Short, precise, then he nodded. Decision made, Victoria straightened again, clinging to her confidence. This was it, the final moment, the outcome she had been waiting for. She looked at Daniel, almost expecting him to react now, to finally show something. But he didn't. He just stood there, calm, certain, like he already knew how this would end. And that was the part she couldn't understand, because from her side, everything pointed in one direction. Security was here. Authority was present. The situation was clear. He didn't belong. He had to be removed. That was the only logical conclusion, right? The guard took a step forward. And in that moment, Victoria felt it. The last piece of control, right there, within reach, just one sentence away from being confirmed. But what she didn't realize was that the same moment she believed would prove her right was the exact moment everything was about to prove her wrong. The guard stared at the ID a second longer than expected, just long enough for the air to change. Victoria Hayes noticed it immediately. That pause wasn't part of the plan. "Well?" she pressed, impatience creeping into her voice. "What does it say?" The guard didn't answer. Not yet. His eyes moved from the card in his hand to the man standing in front of him. Daniel Carter stood exactly as before, tall, composed, a black man in his late 30s, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. His expression was calm, unreadable, unbothered. Like none of this was new to him. The guard swallowed slightly, then spoke into his radio. "Control, confirm property registration for lot 17, he said, voice steady but quieter now. Victoria frowned. "Why are you checking that?" she snapped. "He was trying to get in. That's enough." The second guard glanced at her briefly, then back at Daniel. "Mom, we just need to verify." Verify. The word didn't sit right with her, because there was nothing to verify. She was sure of that. She had to be. Daniel adjusted his cuff slightly, eyes steady, no rush, no explanation. Just patience. The radio crackled static first, then a voice faint, but clear enough. "Lot 17 is registered under Daniel Carter." Silence. It didn't land immediately. Like the words needed a second to settle, to be understood, to be believed. Victoria blinked once. Twice. "No," she said quickly. "That's wrong." But the guard's posture had already changed. Subtle, yet unmistakable. He straightened slightly, turning back to Daniel with a different kind of attention. Respect. "Sir," he said, handing the ID back carefully. "I apologize for the inconvenience." "Sir." This time the word echoed, louder than anything Victoria had said before. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice rising. You're just going to believe that? The guard didn't react to her tone. He kept his focus on Daniel. Everything checks out, he said calmly. Checks out. 2 simple words. And suddenly, nothing made sense. Victoria shook her head, stepping back slightly. That's not possible, she insisted. I've lived here for 2 years. I know who owns these properties. Daniel finally spoke. You know who you've seen, he corrected quietly. That line hit harder than it should have, because it wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was just true. Victoria opened her mouth, then stopped. For the first time since this began, she didn't have an immediate response. Her eyes moved between the guards and Daniel Metching, looking for something that would restore her certainty. But it wasn't there. Instead, there was something else. Doubt, small, but growing. No, she said again, weaker this time. There has to be a mistake. The guard shook his head slightly. No mistake, Mom. The finality in his voice settled the moment. Heavy, unavoidable. Daniel took a slow step forward. Not threatening, not forceful, just moving as someone who no longer needed permission. Is there anything else you'd like to report? He asked. His tone was calm, controlled, but now it carried weight. Authority. Victoria felt it. The shift, the balance she once held, gone. Replaced by something she couldn't control. I didn't know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked at her for a moment, not with anger, not with triumph, but with a quiet understanding. That much is clear, he replied. The words weren't meant to humiliate, but they did something deeper. They exposed everything, the assumption, the certainty, the way she had looked at him. Before he spoke a single word, Victoria's shoulders dropped slightly. The confidence she walked in with had disappeared completely. Around them, the neighborhood had gone silent. No whispers now, no hidden glances. People were watching openly because they understood what had just happened, and more importantly, what it meant. Daniel glanced briefly at the gate, then back at her. You saw me, he said calmly, and decided I didn't belong. No accusation in his tone, just fact. And that made it harder to ignore. Victoria looked down because there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to defend, just the truth standing right in front of her. And for the first time, she had to face it. Victoria's voice came out thin. That doesn't make sense. It wasn't the same voice from before. The sharpness was gone, replaced by something uncertain, something fragile. Daniel Carter stood a few feet away, calm as ever. The guards were silent now, their earlier authority replaced with quiet attention. Even they seemed to understand. This moment wasn't about procedure anymore. It was about truth. I've lived here for years, Victoria continued, trying to rebuild her confidence. I know the owners. I've seen the board members. I've been to community meetings. Daniel listened, unrushed. And yet, he said quietly, you've never seen me. That line hit because it was true, and she knew it. Her mind raced, searching for something, anything, that could explain this. This has to be some kind of technical error, she said quickly. Maybe your name is listed somewhere, but that doesn't mean. It means exactly what it says. Daniel's tone didn't rise, but it carried more weight than her entire argument. The guard shifted slightly, glancing between them. Victoria turned to him immediately. Tell me, she demanded. Who owns this place? The guard hesitated, then answered carefully. Mom, the property is under Mr. Carter's ownership. She shook her head. No. I'm not talking about just this house. I mean the development, the entire community. There was a brief pause, the kind that stretches longer than it should, because everyone already knew what was coming. The guard didn't answer this time. He didn't need to. Daniel did. I do. Silence. Clomit. Absolute. The words didn't just land. They stopped everything. Victoria's expression froze. Not confusion, not disbelief. Something deeper. Like her entire understanding of the situation had just collapsed. What? She whispered. Daniel held her gaze. I own the entire development. No emphasis, no dramatic tone. Just a simple statement. And somehow, that made it even more powerful. The air felt different now, heavier. Like the truth itself had weight. Victoria took a small step back, her balance, emotional, mental gone. That's not possible, she said. But the conviction wasn't there anymore. It sounded like she was trying to convince herself. I've been here for years, she added. I know how things work. People like you don't just. She stopped mid-sentence because she heard it. This time, she heard herself clearly, and there was no way to take it back. Daniel didn't interrupt. He let the silence stretch, let the realization settle. You've seen what you expected to see, he said finally. Each word measured, precise. You've met who you expected to meet. Victoria looked down. Her hands, once confidently crossed, now hung at her sides. You never questioned it, he continued, because it never challenged your assumptions. The truth wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than anything else. Around them, the neighborhood had gone completely still. No movement, no whispers. Just attention, because everyone understood now. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was something bigger. Victoria swallowed hard. I didn't know, she said again, softer this time. Daniel nodded slightly. That's the point. Not harsh, not cruel, just honest. He took a step forward, and for the first time, she stepped back, not because he forced her, but because something inside her shifted. Power, control, certainty, all gone, replaced by reality. I built this place, Daniel said, glancing briefly around. Every contract, every decision, every detail. His voice remained calm, but now it carried history, effort, truth. And yet, he added, looking back at her, none of that mattered the moment you saw me. Victoria's eyes filled slightly, not with tears yet, but with something close, realization. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean. You meant what you believed, Daniel replied, again, calm. But final, the kind of final that doesn't leave room for excuses. Victoria nodded slowly, because she couldn't argue anymore. Not with him, not with herself. The guards stood quietly to the side. Witnesses now, not enforcers. Daniel turned slightly toward the gate, then paused. One moment, he said, looking back at her. She lifted her eyes, unsure, unsteady. Next time, he said, before you decide who belongs. A brief pause, just enough to let it sink in. Make sure you understand what you're looking at. No anger, no pride, just truth. Then he turned, walked toward the gate. And this time, no one questioned him. No one stopped him because now they knew. He didn't just belong there. He owned everything around them. And for Victoria Hayes, that realization didn't just change the moment. It changed everything she thought she knew. The gate closed behind Daniel with a soft, controlled click, no slam, no drama, just final. Victoria Hayes didn't move. She stood exactly where she was, eyes fixed on the gate as if something might change, as if the last few minutes could somehow undo themselves. But nothing did. The street was silent now. Not the quiet from before. The polished, comfortable silence of a wealthy neighborhood. This was different, heavy, unavoidable, real. The guards stepped back toward their vehicle. Their posture no longer authoritative, just distant. Observers now. Not part of the moment anymore. Because this wasn't about security, or trespassing, or even the house. It was about what had just been exposed. Victoria swallowed hard. Her arms, once tightly crossed in confidence, now hung loosely at her sides. She looked down at her hands, as if trying to find the certainty that had been there just moments ago. It was gone. Completely. Across the street, someone shifted. A door closed quietly, but no one spoke because everyone had heard. Everyone had seen. And more importantly, everyone understood. Victoria took a slow breath, but it didn't steady her. Instead, it made everything clearer. Every word she had said replayed in her mind. People like you don't live here. You don't belong. I know who owns this. Each sentence sounded different now. Not confident, not justified. Just wrong, painfully wrong. Her chest tightened. Not because she had been corrected, but because she finally understood why. This wasn't about a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an assumption, one she made instantly, effortlessly, without question. And that realization hit harder than anything Daniel had said. Because he hadn't raised his voice, hadn't insulted her, hadn't tried to embarrass her. He didn't need to. The truth had done that on its own. Victoria looked back at the gate, closed, still, unmoved, just like him. For the first time, she saw it differently. Not as a boundary she was protecting, but as one she had created in her mind, in her judgment, in the way she decided who belonged and who didn't. I didn't even ask, she whispered to herself. The words felt small, but they carried weight because they were honest. She hadn't asked, hadn't paused, hadn't considered. She had seen and decided. That was it. That was all it took. And now, standing there alone, she felt the full weight of that moment. The kind of weight that doesn't pass quickly. The kind that stays. Because it changes something deep, permanent. One of the guards glanced at her briefly before getting into the SUV. No judgment in his expression. Just understanding. Like he had seen this before. The vehicle pulled away quietly, leaving the street exactly as it had been, except it wasn't the same. Nothing was. Victoria finally turned, slowly. The houses around her looked identical, perfect, orderly, unchanged. But she didn't see them the same way anymore, because now she knew. Perfection doesn't mean fairness. Order doesn't mean truth. And certainty doesn't mean you're right. She walked back toward her driveway, her steps slower than before, heels softer against the pavement, less certain. Each step felt heavier, not because of the distance, but because of what she carried with her now. Awareness. And it wasn't comfortable. At the edge of her driveway, she paused, just for a second, then looked back one last time, at the gate, at the space where everything had shifted. And in that quiet moment, one truth settled deeper than anything else. It only takes a few seconds to judge someone, but it can take a lifetime to understand what that judgment really says about you. Victoria lowered her gaze, and this time there was no defense left, only reflection, and maybe, for the first time, change.